trying to push the Black community here as well to just expand our horizons. I think it's easy to box ourselves in. I think a lot of the time the world boxes in as well. And so I think the more we put ourselves in different rooms and around new people, I only see a benefit from that.
Yeah.
Welcome to Passionfroot, where we navigate life, purpose, and faith outside of the box. I'm Adjoa.
I'm Max.
I'm Evan.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Darcie. Let's dive in. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Passionfroot podcast. We are here with two Passionfroot members and then a guest. We have Reese here joining us. We've been through the ringer in the preparation for this podcast. We started recording, or we all got on the podcast recording platform about an hour ago. And then proceeded, each one of us, to have technical difficulties. My camera wasn't coming on, Adjoa's mic wasn't working, and then Reese's mic, it's just not picking up. And we've tried everything. She also had random music playing on her laptop that she couldn't figure out where it was coming from. So everything.
It's so insane.
Everything has happened. So just a disclaimer, Reese will not be using a mic, but honestly, I don't think it's going to be that horrible. We try to have good sound quality, but the conversation is still going to be here. And as the editor, I will also do my best to, make her voice sound even better. So we're here, we're doing it anyway, despite the technical difficulties. And I'm really excited about our conversation today. So the theme, we don't have a title yet, but the working title is something along the lines of building community in the gaps. So seeing a gap in your local community, in your local landscape, and creating a community that can help fill that gap, coming up with an idea that can help fill that gap in general. And I asked Adjoa to be on this podcast. You guys all know her already if you're regular listeners. And she has actually shared that back in her days of university, she worked to build a community that I'll let her talk more about later. But she created that, and it's still running even though she's out of university now. It's still going on, what she created. And then for Reese, I actually met Reese in a business class recently and heard about the community she's been creating in Chattanooga. And I think you said it started in Nashville, right? Is that, am I remembering correctly?
The idea started in Nashville, but actual boots on the ground
in Chattanooga.
Here.
Okay.
In Chattanooga.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I'm really inspired by what you're creating, Reese. It's a very creative centered community. And obviously I am creative obsessed. I love everything that has the word creative attached to it. So I was really intrigued by that, and I've learned a bit about it as I've gotten to know you more, but I also really wanted to share that with our listeners and just have this discussion on what it's like to build community, the importance of building community, the importance of creativity in community and diversity, and also just in our times that we're living through right now. I think community is more important than ever. So I think having conversations about how to go about building that community and how to bridge gaps with that community is a really good and timely one to have. So yeah, that's a little synopsis of what we're about to get into. I'll introduce myself for those of you who might be new to the Passionfruit podcast. I'm Darcie. I'm a visual artist. I do things like painting, drawing, all that good stuff. And I've been gaining a new love for community, and especially community that is centered around creativity, as I've delved more and more into my local community and the local art scene, and just have really seen the beautiful things that are created through that kind of stuff. So that's where my interest in coming up with this idea came from. I will let Reese take the floor. Let us know a little bit about yourself, what your passions are, whatever you want to share, and then maybe tell us what your community is and describe it in a sentence or two.
Yeah. So first, thank y'all for having me. I'm Reese. I am a creative myself. I've done a little bit of everything, but honestly, my heart passion is dance. I'm a dancer. I'm a choreographer. I've been dancing since I was knee high.
Mm.
So dance and just art has always been a huge part of my life. I also come from a very like musical family.
Mm.
My dad is a singer and um, playwright. He's wrote
Whoa.
plays and plays the piano, and my grandma sings. And so I also grew up very much like music oriented. I've played a bunch of different instruments from piano to violin to guitar to all the things. So I feel like arts and creativity is honestly just like in my DNA.
Mm.
And so that's really just kind of been my driving factor as far as like starting SOBI, which is essentially a creative community. Um, and we provide create community through our pop-up events, which are usually art-based, culture-based. And we've been doing that it'll be 4 years
Mm.
in July.
Wow. That's awesome.
And it honestly just started like as an idea, as a passion project. I'm from Chattanooga, born and raised, but I lived in Nashville, the Nashville area, for like 8 years. And so during that time, I felt really just disconnected from what was happening in Chattanooga. I wasn't coming home a lot, so I had no idea exactly what the art scene looked like here. But I was very much immersed into what was happening in Nashville and like really seeing Nashville like expand. I think when I first moved to like the Murfreesboro, Nashville area, there wasn't a whole lot to do as far as um, activities outside of school. There wasn't the art scene was really small, especially the black art scene. And so while I was there within those 8 years, I really saw it like start to emerge. Um, and then I moved away from Nashville right when the pandemic hit. I moved back to Chattanooga maybe the end of 2021. But I did that first pandemic year in Nashville at home. And I was working, I've always worked multiple jobs. But I was working at a country club and I was doing a lot of random jobs. I was working at a country club, I was working at a music licensing company, um, and then I was dancing on the side. So I was doing a lot of things. And then once the pandemic hit, everything kind of stopped. And so I just realized that I wouldn't be able to, sustain myself in Nashville by myself with a lot of my, jobs kind of stopping. And so my parents were like, come home, we'll help support you, and plus, that was really a time to like lock into like family. At least for me, it was. So it was honestly the best thing that I could have done was to come back home to Chattanooga. And it honestly, for a lot of people, it allowed you to pause and think about like what you really wanted and what you needed and what felt, the most important to you. And what I came back to was this idea of like really getting back to what I love to do, what my passions are within the arts, how I can support myself doing that. And then coming back to Chattanooga, I felt like I didn't really know anybody anymore. I had been away for so long. I hadn't been back since high school. And so the only person I really kept in touch with was one person from high school. And so I was really like longing for that community, creating new relationships, and so that was really the driving force of me creating SOBI was, again, me personally needing community and coming back home and like establishing what that looked like.
Mm. That's awesome. I love
So,
that it started out as something like a very felt need from you personally. I think that is very motivating when we can feel something ourselves. Like, obviously, we're empathetic creatures. And so it's very motivating when something is happening to you or you feel a lack and then realize, oh, there's also a lot of other people feeling this too. And then you're able to create that space for you and those other people. I'm excited to dig into that a little bit more. I'm going to move to Adjoa though first. And Adjoa, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well for the new listeners, and then an introduction to what your community was?
Hey everyone, and thanks Darcie for having me as part of this conversation. I'm Adjoa and I'm part of Passionfroot. I'm all about creating your own path in life. I think that's very much inspired by my background. Some of you might know I grew up kind of between worlds. I was born in Australia, raised in Australia, but one side of my family is from Ghana. So I kind of grew up in a place that was very far away from Ghana, surrounded literally by ocean. And I think that played a big part in the way that I led my life. I always was searching out for places of belonging, places that would accept me, places that would embrace me. And so I think community has just always been in my DNA. I also am a lawyer by training, and I grew up quite academic. I loved my books and I loved learning about the world around me. So I loved watching documentaries. And I think that also started to plant seeds of like, how can culture inform how you relate to people around you? So I have always been, as well as academic, quite creative. So even the way I would do my presentations in school, I would try to recite a spoken word, or I would try to add something a bit different. I didn't care if I was embarrassing or not cool. And so I think that I've always had this pull and push between the creative and academic spheres. And so I also have an international relations background, which kind of ties into my interest about the world around me. And specifically, I'm very passionate about young people and their economic empowerment and well-being. And so for me, being at university, that was the perfect space to empower myself. I think universities have a lot of resources there that when you leave, you no longer really have access to. So one of the resources that I actually really drew on was starting my own student society, which I will probably get more into, but just as the brief overview of what it was. So it's called the Australian African Youth Collective, ACE for short, and the gap that it filled was that it was the first Africa-focused society on campus. And the reason why we felt it was a need, or I felt it was a need, is because Africa is literally the second largest continent in the globe, and Australia, while it may be geographically far from Africa, I think that we definitely benefit here from having some knowledge and awareness about what's going on in that part of the world and what contributions people from that continent make. And so it was definitely motivated by wanting to shape perceptions, tell our own stories, and portray an empowering picture of the African continent.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I'm curious how this looked like practically in your activities with ACE, or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I should ask, how did you even go about starting this in the first place? Like you said, you had the idea, you saw the lack, you saw that there was not very many programs for like African youth, and there wasn't a huge emphasis or like exposure to African culture, African art forms, I would assume, like the African continent in general. So you saw the lack there. You knew you wanted to start this. Yeah. How did you go about it? What did that process look like?
So we're traveling back to my early 20s. It was 2019 when the society actually began. But I think similar to Reese, the idea was definitely planted previously. So in my first year of uni in 2017, I had the opportunity to do a study abroad trip in South Africa. And I was staying at a university in Cape Town. And I observed around me that they had a very lively student campus life. And I compared that to my experience I was having back in Sydney. And I felt like I wasn't really getting that experience of connecting in with other students beyond being in the same class. And so I think that really laid the seeds for me. I also saw that within the South African climate, a lot of the young people there, including the young African students, were very vocal about things that were happening in the country at that time, and they had a strong like social justice focus. And so when I came back to my university, I started looking up a process of, okay, how can I bring people around ideas pertaining to Africa. And that's when I found out that you can actually start a student society. I think still some people don't actually know how beneficial that is, because I also found out that we would get like $3,000 per semester in funding, and we could use that
Wow.
funding to run activities, send us to different events that might, have a social, cultural benefit for us as students. And I was like, okay, how do I go about starting it? So I spoke about this with some fellow students who were interested in this. We were all young Africans living in the Australian diaspora. So we just started the process. Like, we just submitted our documents, and then we started telling people about it. And that's how it grew from there.
Very cool. I'm curious, Reese, if like Adjoa, was there anything that you felt the lack of creative community? You knew, like, generally you wanted a creative community for you to lean on, and I mean, even just like be friends with, and support each other in Chattanooga. But was there anything that you saw that kind of demonstrated the structure of what SOBI would be? Because Adjoa was talking about how she went to South Africa and almost like saw what she wanted to bring to Australia. Did you have any moments like that went into the creation and ideation of SOBI?
For sure. Definitely my time in Nashville. When I was a student at Middle Tennessee State University, which was in Murfreesboro. And honestly, I just was one of those kids who I just wasn't into like going to the games, you know what I mean? Like the,
Yeah.
the parties, the like normal college social experiences. I just kind of wasn't into, and I hung out a lot with I spent a lot of my time in the dance department. I was in the dance department at the time, and I had joined a student-led society that was a music program. It was honestly bigger than a music program. That was kind of its roots. But you had music, kids who hung out there, dancers, theater kids. And so we would travel on the weekend into the city of Nashville, and the art scene that was kind of like happening in Nashville, they were hosting art-based events. So it would be like art exhibitions happening, but they were like really small, like grassroots, people like not really knowing what they're doing, but like we're all like creative, wanting to do a thing. And so I would travel to Nashville almost every weekend, and I was going to like an art gallery event, or some sort of like DJ in this other combo. And so that's kind of how I was spending my time on the weekend, was traveling and kind of immersing myself, and it was allowing me to meet more people that were doing things in Murfreesboro, but also Nashville. And so it was really a way for me to connect with other people. Because outside of that, honestly, I grew up as a really
Mm,
shy kid.
same.
And so and so being in those communities allowed me to kind of open up. And so that was one thing I was so used to in Nashville. When I came back home, again, I was like, I don't know what's happening in Chattanooga, but I know I want to bring that energy to Chattanooga. And so a lot of it was just like seeing what was happening in Nashville and wanting to kind of emulate that here.
That's super cool. This is what I love about creativity and about just like human collaboration and interacting with each other, because ideas really, it's like there's a spark that's lit, right? When somebody starts something or does something, and then whoever sees that and is maybe inspired by it, like you literally saw that, you brought it back to Chattanooga. Adjoa, you saw something across the globe in South Africa, you took that spark and you brought it back to Australia and you created something new. That's so exciting. When people are like in contact with each other and just interacting with each other. I've always been more of the like solo project kind of person in school. Like whenever there was a group project, I was like, oh no, like I don't want to do this. But as I've gotten older, and also when it's not forced in school, I've definitely started appreciating like the nature of collaboration and what happens when two or more brains, creative individuals get together and something ignites. It's very exciting. I've been writing notes. I think there was something else I wrote that I wanted to say. Um, just for the general audience and also both of you guys, like we talk a lot about creativity on Passionfroot, and we've said this multiple times and we always try to repeat it as much as possible, that creativity is not just this like typical society idea of what creativity is, because that word often gets lumped in with the arts, you know, the actual like painting and dancing and writing, all that kind of thing. And I love that stuff. I'm an artist, of course I love that stuff, but I also hate the fact that we've become so used to associating those things together, and we have, I think, kind of forgotten the idea or the actual definition of what creativity is. I've heard it described before as, you know, creativity is this life-giving force. It's literally anything that creates and supports life, like that's a creative act, as opposed to the opposite would be like death and destruction, right? Like creativity is just this all-encapsulating thing that applies to just coming up with ideas, creating something that wasn't there before, or even in human relationship. I think we'll touch on this a little bit later, but I really feel like all or almost all communities, there's just innately a creative aspect to it, because when you're in the same room as other people, you almost can't help but create something new. Again, whether that's a physical thing or an idea or an initiative or whatever. Really passionate about this whole topic of creativity, obviously. So going back to you, Reese, could you take us, so we've learned a little bit about the origin story, and kind of how it was created. Well, a little bit about how it was created. If there's any more details on that, like what did it look like? What did the creation process look like? Could you share those with us?
Yeah. So again, SOBI really started as an idea that I was playing with when I was in Nashville. So just even backing it up a little bit before, when I was in Nashville, really it started when I was in Murfreesboro in school. I started a magazine with my roommate, and the focus was like alternative, like hip hop and R&B. And so we used to host events around the magazine, which is honestly how I got into doing any sort of events. And so we were playing with this idea of like how to link these events with some sort of like how to link the events with some sort of like cultural aspect, right? Like we were gonna focus on a specific culture and tie that in maybe with some sort of fusion with another culture, whether that be music, food. And so we were, you know, very much at the beginnings of like brainstorming what this could look like. Because before then, we had done more like things again around the magazine, more music oriented events. And so we really wanted to step into this like arts and culture. And so my background, what I majored in was multimedia journalism. And so my thinking was at these events, you're not going to learn all there is to know about these different cultures, but you'll get like a little taste of it. You'll get a sound bite,
Ah.
which is where the word SOBI comes from. It comes from the word soundbite. So I just took the first two
That's so
letters and I
cool.
put them together. Because a lot of people ask me if SOBI has a meaning, and it doesn't. It's not like an acronym per se, but it definitely has like an origin of like where I came up with the word. It doesn't necessarily mean anything today, but it's still very much like SOBI. We're about connecting you through arts and culture, you know. So like that, the roots are still there. Um, but yeah, just like a little background of just kind of what that word means and where it came from. But it really came from my background in like multimedia journalism and just kind of what I was learning, and then also infusing that into like what I was creating while I was in Nashville.
That's so cool. And so then you just got the idea and just started hosting events? Like
So,
what was the first when you well actually maybe a better question
mhm.
is what when you hosted your first event, did you know you were hosting that for SOBI, or was it SOBI kind of formed as more events started happening?
So yes and no. So I we kind of came up with Sobe while I was in Nashville, and then the pandemic hit, and we did nothing with it. We just had a name. We had a name. We had an idea of what this event could look like, and then literally the pandemic hit, and we kind of sat on it and weren't able to do anything with it. And then when I moved to Chattanooga, I was like, I want to do something. I'm so used to like creating a thing. I was like, I want to do something. I have this little nugget that I kind of was thinking about in Nashville. Maybe I can like, give it some legs while I'm here in Chattanooga. So the first event, I just knew I wanted to do something. The first event was actually like an Afro Caribbean night at the Moxie Hotel. And so we were on. They have like a nice little patio area outside, and I had met. Honestly, it was so even like the job that I'm working at. It aligned so perfectly. I think I came home. I told my one friend that I stayed connected with what I wanted to do. And then she connected me with someone else who connected me with the job that I currently have. And starting at the job, I met this girl who also wanted to do some sort of event coordination. And so literally within like a few weeks of coming home, like I had met all of these people just from like talking and telling like this one person, like, hopes, dreams, aspirations. And she was like, you should be talking to this other person. Um, and so literally, connecting with a girl that I was working with, she helped me kind of organize it, but it was like an Afro Caribbean night. Um, I had I had a DJ. I also ended up meeting this guy who's from is he from Jamaica? I don't want to misspeak, but I met a guy who is also Caribbean, and he's a singer. And he literally found me as I started to promote the event. He found me and was like, "Hey, I actually do this kind of music. Can I perform?" So we ended up actually having a performer there. And honestly, it was just like a first test run. Let's see how this goes. And so I definitely put the name SOBI behind it. I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't know at that time, I wasn't thinking, let me start this like community that it is now. It was like, I want to try to do an event. I may have like this event or name organization, but it was still very much an idea. But honestly, the first event went so well. People at the event was like, okay, so what's next? Is this now a business?
Yeah.
Is this now an organization? Like, what are you doing? And I was like,
And they were like,
I'm
please
still
do
figuring
it. Commit.
I'm still figuring it out. But yeah, so like I definitely had the name Sobi behind it, but at the time I really didn't know what it was yet. I just know I did one event, and I knew I had never, again, I had been away from Chattanooga, but I was talking to people, and nothing like that had ever happened here for real. That was like highlighting like Afro Caribbean music. And so it was something I think people really gravitated towards because it was missing here in Chattanooga. And so that's always something I'm always thinking about as well. Like, what isn't here? Like, how can we highlight the things that people are kind of like craving for? But yeah, very much like I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like, I did an event, it went
Yeah.
well, and I guess I'm gonna try to keep doing it. I
Yeah.
don't know.
It went well, and you had lots of interest in continuing
I
it.
had a lots of interest,
Yeah.
and again, it really just like introduced me to a lot of people that also had that need for like just different kind of events, and also community. And again, as I've been doing it over the last almost 4 years now, it's kind of grown and taken its own life. And I've seen like what are the real needs, and that's what I've been reflecting on. That's what I've been pushing Sobi to be, are the things that I feel like the community
Right.
needs.
What does a typical SOBI event look like? Or are they all pretty different from each other?
They're all
Yeah.
different. I have event series,
Okay.
so I have things that I like to do again. But they've been really different. I've done the first event was like a Afro Caribbean night. I've done art exhibitions. I've done film screenings. Um, I've done parties at bars. I've done things at bars, but also introducing art, which is an event series that I'm doing right now. It's called Club Art. And it's literally what it sounds like. We pop up at a club, at a bar, and we bring in a huge canvas, and then we just open it up for people to paint. And there's no rules behind it. And I think people, again, really gravitate towards it because it's kind of low pressure and it's a nice entry point into art and creativity. You know what I mean? Um, you don't feel like you have to have the badge on that says I'm an
Yeah.
artist to be a part of what's happening. Um, and so yeah, it's looked really different, but things that we keep coming back to are our art exhibitions, our artist talkbacks. I think club art is going to be a really staple event within SOBI because people they just really resonate with it. Um, and I'm looking to do like some sort of staple festival. We're working on a Black History festival right now. And we're already talking about that'll be our first annual. So this may be a thing that we keep bringing back because I feel like here we are missing a lot of programming for Black History Month, which is unfortunate, but also a need that we can help fill. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's awesome.
that answers the
Yeah,
question.
for sure. It definitely answers it. And I'd like to, a lot of things you said, I want to circle back around to them later. But since we're
Okay.
on the topic, Adjoa, could you share what did ACE's like programming or events, activities, what did that actually look like?
I literally love everything Reese was sharing because I
Yeah,
think
so
just in
inspiring.
that, so inspiring, so many lessons. And around the time when ACE started, I was in my early 20s. So it was not perfect by any means, but I think it was definitely what we made it. And I think what also I just want to emphasize is something like SOBI, something like ACE, and as Reese was highlighting, speaking, like a conversation leads to another thing, you connect in with other people, and then other people become so instrumental in this vision. And so I think a lot of our activities and the programs that we did were really possible because we had teams of people. We had people who recommended or connected us with other people. I think probably one of our strongest kind of activities, I would say, is when we actually collaborated with African societies at other universities, because it was actually quite, and I think, Darcie, I don't know if this is something you were going to ask about, but I had kind of wished there was an African society already on campus because the other major universities in Sydney all had one. So that's where I was thinking, oh, like, we don't have one. So I think in that, we had a lot of ground to cover to get to the same level as these other societies. But I would definitely say that helped us actually because we were a newer society. They were like, why don't you come on board with this trivia night that we're running? Why don't you come on board with a film screening that we're already having? Why don't you come on board with this barbecue that we're going to have? So I think a lot of our activities, and this is also an interesting point as well, because I would say, yes, I love social activities, but this is where the academic part came in. I also definitely had visions for ACE to really transform the university's curriculums. So I would have loved to see ACE be part of like creating the first African studies curriculum at an Australian university. Like that was the scale, not just me, but my friends, the early group of us, we were really thinking of that level. But obviously, and I love what Reese said, you do things and you see how they're received, and then you kind of move in that direction. So I think ACE has ended up being more focused on a place of social gathering and maybe some of those more political activist agendas that I love. That's not part of the story just yet. The society is actually, I believe it's become inactive now. But there were 2 rounds of a new executive team since I left, and they ran so it was running, I think, up until like 2024. That was when it was like still active. I graduated before then, so I think that when I look at the activities they were doing, they were more on that social side. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's, man, I'm sorry to hear that it might be a little inactive, but hopefully it'll be what's the word, resurrected soon and come back in full force. And like a note on like the, you know, you had these grand visions for it and it ended up being a bit more of a social club, but like, as I'm sure you'd say yourself, like having a place where you can belong and just be with other people that are like-minded and understand where you're coming from, like that's hugely beneficial too. So maybe, you know, having a structure like that also empowers people that belong to that community to go out and do some of those more political moves, right? So
true.
Yeah,
That's
a domino effect. You provided that support for them. That's awesome. And Adjoa, so obviously Reese's community, very explicitly creative, right? Like she has, it's labeled as a creative community. There's literally nights where people are painting a big canvas. Like it's very explicitly art, creativity. How would you say you saw creativity factoring into ACE? Whether it was like the content or things that you did around the university town, like what did that look like for you guys?
I'm giggling because, you know, when you're thinking about your early 20s-year-old self and just some of the things that you did and envisioned, I think it's great, but it's definitely me. So it's actually interesting that the first event that Reese did was an Afro-Caribbean night, because I think that's something Reese could probably attest to as well. I think within these subcultures that we have, diasporas around the world, music and art, storytelling is definitely a big part of anything that you do, even if it's not explicit. And I know that in the early days when we were kind of struggling for membership, because even though social clubs on campus are attractive, I think maybe this is a nuanced point, but for, I guess, the African diaspora, there's a lot of other responsibilities or other dynamics going on that might limit their ability to like fully invest in a social club. And so we were trying to get really creative with how we attracted people to attend these events. So we would try to center them around food a lot, and those sorts of things to entice people. But I also think that, like I said, we have big visions. So we were also thinking about creativity, like how can we connect our society with Africans, young Africans on the African continent? So one of the things that we actually started doing was we connected with some young university students at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria and the University of Legon in Ghana. And we started having these Zoom meetings, and our intention was to like have this cross-continental project where we were working on an issue that was affecting young people in both of our contexts. It never took shape, but we built relationships that I'm still in touch with two of the people from that group.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of creativity that came from the group, was trying to think differently about how we can contribute, make a difference for our community. And also, I think creative in the sense of we had a newsletter as well. And yes, there's like that branding element. One of our founding members, he's an artist, so he created the logo and everything like that. So we had a newsletter called Africa Rising that we would send out to everyone on campus. And the whole point of it was to actually try to change these perceptions about Africa as this monolithic place that's, you know, poverty, war, starvation, unemployment. And instead, we would look at even people of African descent in popular culture, great things that we were doing, and we would try to really highlight their Afro roots and how culture has played a part in their success. And I think we also highlighted African PhD students and African staff members at the university, because we just really wanted to portray everybody in a positive light, a strengths-based approach to the stories that we were sharing to kind of counter this narrative of this is this place that's far away, filled with all these problems, and try to actually highlight the contributions, including in the creative arts, in music, but also in science and technology and everything. So yeah, I'd say that's kind of how creativity showed up in the society.
That's awesome. Yeah. I love that. So the newsletter, you said it like went out to the entire campus pretty much.
Yes, I think we would, however we were doing it, I know for me, I wasn't tech savvy, so I think I was like manually adding people's emails.
Ooh.
Like manually adding.
Oh no. Ooh.
Guys, this is why it's funny, because I'm literally laughing at just like, the vision was there, you know, the intention was there. But yeah, it would go out very broadly, and we got a lot of leads from that, of people interested in what we were doing, because they were seeing, oh yeah, cool.
Yeah. I know when you were talking to me before the podcast, you were talking about how, like, you know, it was obviously a place of belonging for African students, right? But you also wanted to try to invite in non-African students as well, like for the sake of exposure, for the sake of also just like diversity and community. And like, do you feel like that was successful? How did you go about it? And yeah, do you think it was successful? Were you able to attract that kind of audience as well?
Well, on a more legal note, not strictly legal, but you could not establish a society that is targeted at a specific, I guess, racial group, or like you could not create a society where membership is exclusive to a certain kind of person. I think there was more nuance around that. Not saying that was our intention. That was our intention. But
you couldn't do it even if you wanted to.
Even if you wanted to, exactly. Yeah. And I think the whole point is a lot of the societies that are started, like I think it was a Japanese anime society at our uni. It was so popular, but I could say probably the majority of people in that society were not of Japanese heritage. And it just shows how culture can traverse different cultures, like art, creativity, belonging. It doesn't have really a specific language or belong to just a certain group of people. I would say we definitely welcomed people to join the society who were not of an African descent. And we did have people join who were from different parts of the world. We also had like a North African presence, which I guess culturally within Africa, like there is sometimes a divide between sub-Saharan Africa and Northern Africa. So that also introduced like an Arab perspective into the society. And then when we connected with the university leadership, because actually coincidentally at the time we started, the university was actually implementing an Africa strategy because they wanted to attract more African international students to the university. And a lot of people in the university leadership were not African, but they became very interested in our society, and that introduced more of this, dialogue, conversation, how can we exchange information and things like that. But I honestly would say that probably maybe from the society standards, we were not successful at doing that, because I think that at the end of the day, it became a space that people were wanting to go to because maybe they felt safe, or they felt like these communities weren't available anywhere else. And I think that there's naturally, because it's called the African Australian Collective, even though there's Australian in there, which means it could be opened up to a broader array of people just gravitate to the Africa, and it's like, okay, maybe this is only for people of African descent. But I would say that it was definitely an open, welcoming space where friends are welcome. We call them Friends of Africa. Definitely. I
love that. That's very cute.
Welcome.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
But practically it didn't if we look at the numbers, if we look at the stats,
Yeah. And on that same note, Reese, I've heard you talk before about how you want SOBI to be a diverse space, right? But you've also shared that it typically attracts mostly people from the black community, and you've had a harder time getting non-black and, let's be frank, white people to show up to these events. Could you talk a little bit about that? Why do you think it's been more difficult to get that diversity in there? Why do you want why do you want it to be more of a diverse space as well?
For sure. I mean, honestly, I feel like I'm attracting people because it looks like
Yeah.
me. You know what I mean? Like it's created by a Black
Mhm.
woman. And so I think people, again, kind of what she was saying, uh, are able to connect with things that look like them, things that feel like they feel safe in, they feel like it's for them. And so I think when people see me, um, a lot of people may assume that it's for Black
Mhm.
creatives. Even although I say it's welcome, it's open to everyone. Um, I think that's a thing also that's been missing here is this idea of like Black creative community. So I feel like I'm filling a void here. And so Black creatives are looking for a
Right.
place. And so they see me and they feel welcome to say, okay, SOBI is at least a place where I can go and find
Yeah.
community. Um, but again, I'm always looking to like expand. I'm always looking to expand. And I think the easiest way to know that you're welcome in a space is to see
Mhm.
yourself,
For
is
sure.
to see yourself in a space. So I'm always using that through marketing and social media. I'm always highlighting all the people that come to my events. But I will say it's a priority for me to also push Black creatives because just as a Black creative, I've just been in spaces where it just feels like I haven't been heard, I haven't been seen, I've been pushed to the background. And so I use SOBI's platform to make sure that I am highlighting Black
Mhm.
artists. Again, just as a Black woman, Black creative, like I always keep that in the forefront because I feel like we miss a lot of those opportunities. And so I'm always pushing that narrative, but always, again, like welcoming it to everyone. And we've worked with everyone, you know what I mean? We've worked with white creatives, we've worked with Hispanics, we've worked with everyone. I think it just really closely resonates with the Black community here. But I think as we keep going, we'll continue to expand. And I think it's important because it just allows you to like invite different
Mhm.
perspectives to like open up that diversity. I feel like as soon as we get landlocked in like exactly only with people that look like us and have the same sort of like life experiences, it just limits our knowledge and our perspective. So
Mhm.
I think it's important. I feel like we all need each other, especially right now.
Yes.
I feel like we all need each other. And so I'm always going to be pushing to like expand Sobeys reach and keep it open to everyone. It wasn't, I think I told you I had, when I first was starting to see like, okay, I'm getting a lot of like the Black community in my events. Should I make that the thing?
Mhm.
You know, should I say, okay, we're here for Black creatives?
Yeah.
But honestly, that just didn't resonate with me.
Mhm.
Again, it's something that's at the forefront, but all the creative communities that I've ever been a part of has looked very different. If anything, especially as because I grew up as a ballet dancer
Mhm.
growing up.
Wow.
And so I usually was in spaces where I was the only person that looked like me. I hardly ever was in creative spaces where it was only Black people outside of maybe like going to church,
Right.
because
Yeah.
like church can be a very creative space as well,
Yeah.
right? I danced at
For
church, I
sure.
was in the choir. And so outside of like church experience, when I was at ballet, I was one of two Black girls in the space. When I played the violin, I was like, it was maybe like four or five of us in the orchestra. And so I was used to being kind of the other in the
Mhm.
other in
Mhm.
other rooms. And so but it was important that I even had those experiences because again it allowed me to just like expand my perspective if I had never gotten outside of my own community. And so I always say I feel like I can be in any room,
Yeah.
like I've worked at country clubs, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I know I I know what that looks like. I know what that looks like. And honestly, it's just helped kind of shape me as a person. And so I feel like it's important. I'm always trying to push the Black community here as well to just expand our horizons. I think it's easy to box ourselves in. I think a lot of the time the world boxes in as well. And so I think the more we put ourselves in different rooms and around new people, I only see a benefit from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree so much with everything you said. I think you put that really beautifully. And I feel like with SOBI, it seems like you're walking a pretty good line. Like you're keeping the balance there, the kind of balance that needs to exist, I guess. Because yeah, the whole topic of like Black spaces, I think it's really important. I mean, speaking as somebody in the United States, like I think it's especially important there, but obviously all over the world, in Australia, where often, yes, Black people are like kind of sidelined or underestimated, or very accustomed to being in places where they don't see a lot of people like themselves. And so I think we should have those places and we should support those places. And then at the same time, just like you said, Reese, like it's not good for anybody to always be only around somebody that looks like them, right? And I mean, white people do that all the time. There's a lot of there's a lot of improvements that white people need to make in that area as well. And then I think also when you have Black spaces, like, you know, I don't want to say it should be on Black people to try to be like, oh, let's let other people that are not Black come into our space, because I think you guys carry a lot, and having those Black spaces is really important. But then, like you said, with the way you're doing it with SOBI, like you're supporting Black creatives in a space, in a city that maybe doesn't do that so much, while also making sure that other people who are not Black also feel like they're welcome and safe to come in, and like this is for everybody, even though you're still wanting to really support Black creatives in that area. That just feels to me like a really good balance that you're striking. Yeah, either one of you want to say anything else about like Black spaces, the importance of them, but also how, as community leaders, can we invite diversity without trying to make it a forceful thing, and then also while still like prioritizing giving Black people a voice, where often they haven't really had much of a voice.
I'll say this. I totally understand why there's uh, Black only
Mm-hmm.
spaces. Like, I think there's a reason why that exists, and it's important, and also that's sacred. And I believe those spaces exist just because, just speaking as a Black person living here in America,
Mm-hmm.
I think we are really used to having like almost like our culture taken away from us, you know? Um, and so I think we've had to create spaces just for us because we weren't allowed to be in other
Mm-hmm.
spaces. You know, we weren't allowed to be in other a part of the club, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So we literally had to create our own communities, our own organizations for us to be able to express ourselves in that way. And so that's why those things exist. And I understand why, because there's a whole conversation around why do we have to invite other people into our spaces? We need to protect our spaces because people are coming in and want to take from us and not give anything back to us. And those spaces exist, you know? And so I feel like those are spaces that already exist even here in Chattanooga. And so again, what I'm doing with SOBI, because I feel like those spaces exist, I don't necessarily need to create another space that looks like that. You know, I think what's important about what I'm creating with SOBI is I'm creating a diverse space, but it's led by
Mm-hmm.
diversity, you know, it's led by a Black
Yes.
woman, you know, versus
That's, yes,
a
so
white
fair.
person starting a
Yes.
space and saying, "Oh, it's a diverse space," and then you look at it and it's like, "Is it a
Yeah.
diverse space?" You know, and so it's like I just have another perspective on what I believe diversity looks
Mm-hmm.
like, and that's why I say I'm gonna always keep us in the forefront. I'm gonna always be thinking about how I can highlight Black and brown people because I know if I'm not doing it, other places and spaces are not doing it for
Mm-hmm.
us, you know? So that's always going to be in the forefront. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then this is not a space for you, you know? I feel like when I first started SOBI, I was struggling with that, with trying to appease everyone. And
Right.
I had to learn like this isn't going to be for everyone. I can say all is welcome, but if you come into this space and you feel like you're not comfortable with Black and brown people in the room, LGBTQ people, you know what I mean? Like, if you're not comfortable with the people in the space, then this space isn't for you. Um, but yeah, I think it's important to be bridging that gap, especially here in this country during this time. Because honestly, I feel like race is just used as a mechanism to divide us.
It
Literally, it's
is.
been
It's a
used
tool.
to divide us. It's a tool. It's a tool, and it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
It's not real. And that's why I also don't play into it. I'm just like, I love that Black and brown people feel safe at SOBI. But I'm really trying to push us past the point of even that being a factor. Why can't we exist to just exist? Why do we have to, like, again, check all of these boxes? So I think it's a thing that I'm always going to push for, is to just, like, be creating the bridge. And I think for other community leaders to do that, they just have to be curious. You can't say you want to open the door and you want this to be a diverse space if you don't care truly. This has to be like a personal journey for you. You have to be curious about what people on the other side are doing, like wanting to bridge that gap. You have to want that. And I feel like it starts with curiosity. It starts with a want, as a community leader, and understanding what true community looks like, providing a resource for everyone, and not because you look like this or look like that. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
in my notes for takeaways from this episode, I just wrote "be curious" in big, like, capital letters and put an underline under it, because I think that is really, really so important. And like, you said that for community leaders, and then I'd also say the same thing for community members, like, be curious. I think, thinking of SOBI's spaces and how maybe you're not as attracting as many white people, and that's because, again, you're a Black woman leading the space, like you said. Black people, it's a safe space for them. Unfortunately, I think, like, white people aren't as likely to go to a space that they're like, oh, this is for Black people, it's not for me. But, like, that's not the mindset to have. We need to have the mindset of curiosity, wanting to go in and learn and interact and learn about people's different experiences and different perspectives and different cultures. So I would say, the same thing for community members. Just have that, lead with curiosity, and when it comes to community and building stronger communities together. Adjoa, did you have anything you wanted to say on this topic, in addition to what Reese has said?
Honestly, I just support everything Reese said. Like, I'm also thinking, like, Reese, where were you back in 2019 when ACE was starting? I feel like Reese would have brought some amazing vibes to the society.
Thank you.
I really think I'll be listening back to this episode and really, like, drawing from that, because I think the way that things are moving, it's more important than ever to not buy into these divisive narratives. And I think part of the reason why ACE became like a well-loved society within the university was because we were building the connections with people. It really was like Africa, Australia. We were trying to improve the perception of Africa for the benefit of the Australian context as well. Like, look at African countries as potential trade partners, as places where we can actually all prosper, we can all succeed. So I think that personally for me, I've always traversed, it kind of feels like, two opposite ends of the spectrum. I think that for me, the things that need to get done and a lot of the changes that need to be made require us to work together. And I feel like, honestly, it's even scientifically shown that organizations and places that are diverse actually are more successful, because then there is more of a strength pool to draw from. There are diverse perspectives to pull from. So I think actually it's more of it's going to become more and more required for us to, like, work together. And so I agree definitely, though, with Reese. There are certain places, even outside of the Black Afro-descendant community, that I just wouldn't be part of, because that there's a reason why they exist. But then I think definitely, as Reese said, there are now more opportunities for us. And I think this younger generation is being more even collaborative and realizing that we need to work together. So
Yeah.
I feel very hopeful about the future, and I hope that I can attend a SOBI event somehow.
Yes. That would be amazing.
Yes. We should I'm just going to pull up to Australia. We're bringing SOBI to Australia.
Let's go.
Absolutely. Make SOBI global. That'd be fantastic. I love that. Well, I think I have maybe 1 or 2 more questions for you guys, depending on time. Drawing back on the idea of creativity and bringing it into this conversation of diversity, how do you guys feel like creativity unites people? Why do you think, because I think we do see that happen. Why do you think that is? Reese, at your events where creativity is like the focal point, do you see this happening in certain ways? People, whether it's like different races and cultures, or even just different socioeconomic spheres, or like different perspectives, different people from different interest groups, like whatever. How do you see that happening at your events and in your experience?
Yeah, I feel like the arts just connects people. It's its own language. I feel like you can have different backgrounds and can connect creatively. I see that all the time with SOBI, especially in the events where you're kind of creating together, where people are painting together. Like it like sparks a conversation. You may be talking to a person that you would never talk to, and now you're on a canvas together and you're having a conversation. So I feel like art is its own language. And I learned that really early as a dancer. Again, I was introverted, I was shy. And so I feel like I really first became comfortable communicating through my body, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel like art is just its own language. It allows it allows that bridge. It allows that bridge to connect again to people that you may just not have the same like life experiences with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a language, it's a tool.
I guess like maybe one reason this could be is like art is tapping into that inner world, right? Like the emotional world, or certain truths that we all just kind of understand, and that's how it can connect people, because you see somebody else that is vastly different from you creating something, again, whether it's like something they've written or something they've drawn, or a performance of some sort, and you're like, I recognize these things that this person is tapping into. I recognize the emotions they're feeling because I've experienced them myself too. I think that's really beautiful. Adjoa, did you have anything you'd like to add?
This is like such an exciting thing to think about, because honestly, I feel like art and creative expression I feel I can be more honest sometimes when I'm writing like a piece of spoken word poetry, or like I'm observing some art that maybe it's really confronting, it's conveying a certain emotion. I feel like it can really introduce these hard conversations, and you can kind of like use that as a way to like speak about your own experience and like connect with others. And so I think that's something that I also appreciate about artists themselves. Like I know that everyone has creativity within themselves, but I was speaking to an artist, or I came across something somewhere, an artist was saying that they never really like explain what their artwork means. It's always like there for interpretation. And I think that is really powerful, because I think sometimes when we just look at communication very narrowly, I love what Reese said about like learning to communicate through your body, and like other ways of communication can be just as powerful. We don't always have to have these justifications for why we feel a certain way or why we want to express ourselves in a certain way. So I think that is really powerful, because that, like Reese said, is an own language of itself that can really bridge gaps and divides, as Reese said.
Yeah. Beautiful. I feel like honestly this is like we've come to a great note to kind of end on. I want to revisit some of those takeaways again. I think some of the things for me was, again, curiosity, leading with curiosity. That's definitely something that I'm going to take away from this episode. And I hope all our listeners will as well. Leading with curiosity when it comes to learning about people that are different from you, or people that are, disagree with you on certain things, politics being one. Lead with curiosity. Empathy is not bad, despite certain popular rhetoric that is happening around the States right now. Empathy is really important, and we can't let go of that. And I think art and community together is a great way to really start to experience that empathy. It's really hard to hate somebody that that you've seen face to face, that you've talked to. And that's also an interesting thing. Oh, man, I don't want to go on like a whole other tangent, but actually before this, Adjoa brought up the aspect of like, digital community. Like, what if we even talked about that a little bit? And I think digital community is important, but we're seeing like the social media world, it becomes really inflamed as we're going through really times of political upheaval. And I think it's important to, if you can handle it, be in those spaces and use your voice and like talk to other people in those spaces. But the power of physical, local community cannot be underestimated. And so that's something else I'd love everybody else to take away from this episode. Like, please go to your local scenes, whatever they may be, put yourself in these spaces, put yourself in diverse spaces, and really, really lean into each other. And then lastly, the other thing that I wrote down that I think, Reese, you also said this, like art being its own language. Art is it's a language that we all can speak, and it can unite all of us. And Adjoa, you said it's a great way of approaching conversations as well. So maybe another takeaway for people too could be, even if you're not an artist, don't really understand art, like try to at least understand where we're coming from, like creative expression, human creative expression. This is art. And you're capable of it, and you're also capable of learning through it, and giving other people a voice through that medium and trying to communicate in that way too. Any other takeaways that you guys would like to leave with our audience before we log off? Or anything also that I just didn't bring up that you really wanted to talk about with your communities?
I don't think so. But this was an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
Like I really enjoyed this.
You guys are fantastic.
I wasn't sure how this was gonna go, but this was I love talking about stuff like this. And also I appreciate both of y'all just speaking about how creativity can just show up differently. I think that's always a line that I'm trying to like walk, and something that I'm always talking about with like people that attend my events, and feeling like you don't have to be this artist, creative, I paint, I draw, because it has that around it.
Yes, it does.
And that's why I'm always trying to figure out like what's the like easy entry point, of just like creative expression, whether that's creative thinking, creative problem solving, creative writing. Some people enjoy journaling, and I'm like, that's a creative expression. And so, knowing that creativity is for everyone.
Yeah. And the word you used, entry point, I really like that word too. Making it accessible for everybody, giving people an entry point. That's something I will probably think on for a little while. Because as somebody who like went to school for art, and through that have been able to understand a little bit more of the ins and outs of like the art world and art history. It's so interesting. It's so fascinating. And there's so much you can learn from it. But there's so many people that don't know about it, or even just feel too intimidated or feel gate kept away from it. And so this idea of, or this challenge of trying to make art more accessible for people is definitely something I've maybe not been acting on much, but been chewing on in the back of my head for a little while. So I'll be thinking about that word, entry point. Adjoa?
I would say, just because I'm all about forging your own path in life and all of that sort of thing, I think in like in our early 20s, as we're like going through life, especially though at that time you might be feeling like quite lost and not sure like where you fit in and whether you have anything of value to offer, because sometimes the places around you are not affirming that, they're not centering that. And honestly, I wouldn't say that starting something is necessarily like in everyone's story. I think we all start things in different ways. So this is not necessarily like advice to go and do something. But I think just from hearing like Reese's story and knowing my own story and everything that has led to, even now that I'm in my late 20s, I definitely feel like that provided me a place to connect with other people who were feeling similarly. And so the impact went beyond me. It was like other people who were also feeling a similar way got to be empowered, got to have our stories centered. And, you know, now when we're going into like leadership places, or we need to speak about our experience and how we've shown leadership qualities or creativity, problem solving, we're like, oh, well, back in 2019.
Yes.
So, you know, create your own table, create your own opportunities where you feel like the world is not giving them to you, because you might be surprised with what you find within yourself.
Yes.
Yes.
And don't be afraid to
said.
like start small too. Again, like Reese,
Yes.
you literally started with the name, and then you held on to that for a little while, and then it came around again, and like the season arrived for SOBI to start. And again, you only started with one event. It wasn't even something you knew for sure you were going to keep doing, and then you kept doing it. And I think it can be really overwhelming to think, oh wow, do I have the capacity to start something as big as like an organization, a company, a community, you know? But just starting small, just for like your immediate, even friend group and acquaintances, even if it just starts and you don't continue it, you know, you still got something good out of that, but you never know what could happen out of that. So yeah, before we go, I know I keep saying that, before we go, Reese, would you like to share your social media handle for yourself or for SOBI? Also, I know you have a website as well. How can people learn more about SOBI?
Yes, my personal Instagram handle is created by Reese. Is created X Reese, and that's REESE. My socials for SOBI is the same on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, which is at SOBI Connect, and that's SOBI Connect. And then our website is sobiconnect.com.
Nice. Adjoa. Adjoa's already following.
Yeah, I was following, guys.
That's awesome. And Adjoa, we always, you know, the Passionfroot creators, we always share our links below, but you've also been really active on YouTube recently, and I'm a bit late to that. You've actually been active for a while now, but it's kind of popping off. Do you want to share the link or the handle for that for anybody who'd like to check out some of your personal videos?
Yes, it's Adjoa in Ghana. So yeah, if you want me to spell that, that's ADJOAA in Ghana.
Nice.
all together. Yeah, and yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Yes, you both are fantastic. I got a lot out of this conversation, and I think our listeners will as well. And to our listeners, if you guys would like to join the conversation, you know, if you're watching on YouTube, of course, comments are always there. If you're listening to this on a streaming platform, you can just press the send us a text button and give us your thoughts on the episode. We can't respond back to you via that way, but if you would like to really have more of a conversation about this and join the community, we do have a Discord channel as well, and that link will be in the show notes / YouTube caption. So check us out on our other socials as well, Instagram, TikTok, like I said, YouTube, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode. So thank you for tuning in. All right, let's keep growing together, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Stay tuned for our next episode, and in the meantime, let's keep growing together.